As always, timestamps have been provided, and be sure to check out my new React channel down below where we cover more videos like this. Enjoy the video.
Sanctified Speech explores the idea that certain ancient languages possess inherent spiritual power that modern tongues lack entirely. Biblical Hebrew, Aramaic, and other ancient languages supposedly formed direct channels to the divine realm, containing phonetic patterns and syllabic structures that resonated with supernatural frequencies. Linguistic scholars investigating this theory point to peculiar grammatical structures in ancient holy texts that don't translate properly into modern languages. These structures allegedly contained encoded spiritual commands or prayers that activated divine intervention when spoken aloud with proper pronunciation and ritual context. Historical records mention religious figures experiencing trances, visions, or manifestations after reciting specific passages in their original tongues. Modern attempts to recreate these experiences fail because contemporary speakers lack both the correct pronunciation and the spiritual connection that existed before humanity's supposed fall from grace. The theory connects humanity's spiritual decline directly to the Tower of Babel event, suggesting it wasn't merely linguistic confusion but divine linguistic censorship. God deliberately fragmented human language to prevent access to powerful spiritual speech patterns. Each subsequent language evolution took humanity further from the original sanctified speech. Some religious scholars maintain that the decreasing frequency of miracles throughout history correlates directly with the loss of these sacred linguistic patterns. They argue modern prayers lack efficacy not because of declining faith, but because they're spoken in spiritually impotent languages constructed for mundane communication rather than divine connection. Fringe religious groups have attempted to reconstruct these sanctified speech patterns through intense study of ancient texts and meditation. Their members report increased spiritual experiences, though skeptics attribute this to heightened suggestibility and group reinforcement rather than any inherent power in the reconstructed languages. Interestingly, glossolalia, speaking in tongues, might represent the mind's unconscious attempt to access these lost linguistic patterns. Practitioners often report feelings of direct divine connection during these episodes, possibly tapping into remnants of sanctified speech buried in collective human memory. Audio analysis of certain ancient chants reveals harmonic patterns that produce measurable effects on brain activity. Whether these effects are merely physiological or represent genuine spiritual attunement remains hotly debated among researchers brave enough to investigate this controversial theory. Internet created for crime refers to a theory that the global computer network we know today wasn't designed primarily for scientific research or communication, but as a shadowy communication tool for elites. According to this conspiracy, ARPANET and early internet infrastructure was intentionally developed to give powerful figures an untraceable messaging system, with the public-facing aspects of the internet merely serving as cover. Some proponents point to the timing of the internet's development during the Cold War, suggesting it emerged conveniently when government agencies needed secure communication channels. They note how quickly intelligence agencies and military departments adopted and expanded early network technologies before public access became widespread. Advocates highlight how the original network architecture included surprising resilience against monitoring and tracking, features that would seem unnecessary for its stated academic purposes, but perfect for clandestine communications. While today's internet is heavily surveilled, conspiracy theorists argue that sophisticated users, particularly elites with specialized knowledge, can still access hidden communication channels within the structure. The theory often connects to the abandoned internet conspiracy, suggesting that once the internet became too public and accessible, elites migrated to even more secretive communication methods. Some versions propose that powerful figures now use quantum entanglement networks, direct neural interfaces, or even psychic communication techniques that bypass physical infrastructure entirely. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect is the suggestion that technological progress follows a pattern. Each breakthrough communication technology becomes publicly available only after the powerful have already moved on to something better. This creates a perpetual information gap where the masses always operate with yesterday's tools while elites communicate through means that won't be revealed for decades. Some believers in this theory interpret certain glitches, unexplained network behaviors, or obscure protocols as remnants of the original elite communication system still embedded within today's internet architecture. Like digital fossils, these artifacts supposedly reveal glimpses of the network's true purpose to those who know where to look. Naturally, proponents see the explosive growth of internet surveillance as further evidence, not to monitor ordinary citizens, they claim, but to ensure nobody accidentally stumbles upon the hidden channels still used by the powerful. Meanwhile, the rest of us just argue about cat videos and political memes exactly as the creators intended. Extradimensional Homogeneity posits that the global trend toward urban uniformity may serve a darker purpose, to conceal accidental dimensional travel. According to this theory, the Mandela effect, where masses of people share false memories, isn't just a psychological curiosity, but evidence of individuals slipping between parallel dimensions unawares. Proponents suggest that powerful entities are deliberately homogenizing our cities, architecture, and culture to prevent dimensional travelers from realizing they've crossed over. In a world where every shopping mall, airport, and downtown looks increasingly identical, how would you know if you've suddenly jumped to a slightly different reality? The standardization of urban spaces across the globe effectively masks the telltale signs that might alert an interdimensional traveler. The theory draws connections to the rapid disappearance of unique cultural expressions and architectural styles in favor of glass and steel uniformity. These aren't just the natural consequences of globalization, but a calculated effort to create seamless transitions between dimensions. After all, if ancient Rome looked dramatically different across parallel worlds, a dimensional jumper would immediately notice the discrepancy. But if your local Starbucks looks identical in every possible reality, you'd never suspect a thing. Theorists point to the accelerating rate of cultural homogenization since the late 20th century, coinciding with increased reports of Mandela effect incidents. They argue that certain power structures are aware of dimensional bleed-through and are frantically standardizing our reality to prevent mass panic from people realizing they're not in their original dimension. Some believers take this further, suggesting that certain global corporations deliberately spread identical designs worldwide, not for brand recognition but to serve as dimensional anchors, fixed points that remain consistent across multiple realities. The golden arches of McDonald's might be less about hamburgers and more about maintaining the stability of our multiverse. Skeptics argue that urban homogeneity has simpler explanations: economic efficiency, globalization, and the natural spread of successful design concepts. Still, the theory persists among those who've experienced the uncanny sensation of being somewhere both familiar and subtly wrong, perhaps because they're standing in a nearly identical shopping mall in a nearly identical city, but in an entirely different dimension. Anti-Earth biology refers to the disturbing theory that biological life created away from human influence could evolve into powerful weapons against humanity. Scientists speculate that if human auras can influence nearby life as suggested in the feral auras theory, then organisms developed in complete isolation from Earth might develop entirely different biological properties. The concept suggests that space-based laboratories or remote celestial bodies could serve as perfect incubators for these alien organisms. Without exposure to human oral fields, these life forms might develop abilities or defenses that Earth biology never needed to evolve. The most concerning aspect involves the potential weaponization of such organisms. When introduced to Earth, these entities would encounter human auras for the first time, while humans would have no natural defenses against the organism's own oral signatures. This mutual unfamiliarity creates a scenario similar to introducing a novel pathogen to an immunologically naive population, except potentially far more devastating. Some fringe researchers believe certain government space programs have already begun experimenting with off-world biological engineering. They point to unusually secured modules on space stations and unexplained biological containment breaches as evidence of early anti-Earth biology research. Conspiracy theorists note that traditional bioweapons face limitations due to evolutionary constraints and defensive countermeasures. However, organisms developed entirely outside human influence might bypass these limitations, creating threats that conventional medicine or biological defenses couldn't anticipate or counter. The few whistleblowers who have spoken about these programs describe containment protocols far beyond standard biohazard procedures. These measures supposedly account not just for physical contamination, but for aural contamination that could compromise the organism's development or trigger unpredictable mutations when exposed to human auras. Theorists suggest the perfect anti-human weapon wouldn't just attack our bodies, but our very aural essence, the field that supposedly connects all terrestrial life. Talk about taking alien invasion to a whole new level. Essence consumption and essence feeding describes the theory that humans absorb spiritual essence when consuming other living beings. According to this concept, eating isn't merely a physical process, but also a metaphysical one where we internalize portions of soul energy from our food. The theory expands on the regenerative death consumption concept, suggesting that humans don't just gain nutrients from meat, but also absorb fragments of soul essence accumulated within animals. This spiritual transfer supposedly explains why ancient humans appeared stronger and more capable than modern populations. Proponents point to historical texts referencing sacred objects like the Holy Grail, which supposedly allowed drinkers to absorb divine essence and gain eternal life. These believers argue this is simply a concentrated version of the same process that occurs during normal consumption. The theory attributes modern humanity's perceived weakness to industrialized food production. Factory farming, chemical additives, and unnatural animal treatment supposedly weaken the soul essence of livestock before slaughter. When humans consume this metaphysically depleted meat, they receive diminished spiritual nourishment compared to their ancestors who ate naturally raised animals with intact soul energy. Some adherents cite ancient ritual feasts and ceremonial hunts as evidence that earlier cultures understood this spiritual exchange. They believe indigenous hunting prayers weren't merely superstition, but acknowledgement of the essence transfer between predator and prey. Modern advocates often connect this theory to contemporary wellness movements, arguing that organic and ethically raised foods retain more spiritual essence. They've even coined terms like soul nutrition to describe the intangible benefits supposedly missing from processed foods. Soul essence devotees hold potluck dinners where they consume only hand-raised animals while chanting affirmations, because nothing builds community like a metaphysical meat feast. Clone consumption refers to a fringe theory that builds upon the broader essence consumption conspiracy, suggesting that modern cloning technologies are being deliberately advanced to create soulless versions of livestock for human consumption. According to believers, consuming cloned animals deprives humans of vital spiritual nourishment found only in naturally born creatures that possess souls. Proponents claim that powerful interests are aware that animals possess spiritual essence necessary for human health beyond mere nutritional value. They argue that naturally born animals transfer subtle energetic properties when consumed, properties entirely absent in genetically identical clones. The theory suggests this spiritual malnourishment is an intentional strategy to weaken humanity's metaphysical resilience. The conspiracy centers on the idea that industrial food producers are gradually transitioning to cloned livestock to create a population that is physically fed but spiritually starved. Some adherents point to increasing rates of depression, anxiety, and spiritual disconnection as evidence of this soul-depleting diet already taking effect in societies where cloned animal products have allegedly been secretly introduced. Believers cite ancient spiritual traditions that emphasize the sacred relationship between humans and the animals they consume, claiming these practices recognize the transference of life force. They suggest that modern regulatory agencies are complicit in hiding the true nature of cloned meat, with labels and certifications designed to obscure rather than clarify origins. The most extreme versions of this theory connect clone consumption to various elite groups, allegedly attempting to make humanity more docile and easily controlled. They believe a spiritually weakened population loses access to intuition, discernment, and connection to higher consciousness, making them perfect consumers and workers who lack the spiritual strength to resist oppression. Some proponents have created underground soul food networks where they exchange naturally conceived and raised animals, complete with elaborate verification processes to ensure no cloned animals enter their supply chain. These communities often practice elaborate blessing rituals before consumption to maximize essence absorption. Critics point out the complete lack of scientific evidence for any metaphysical difference between cloned and naturally conceived animals. They also note that despite regulatory approval of some cloned animal products in certain countries, actual commercial cloning of livestock remains extremely limited due to high costs and low efficiency, making widespread clone consumption virtually impossible at present. But then again, that's exactly what they would say, isn't it? Media division refers to a theory suggesting that the proliferation of digital media serves not just to promote consumerism, but to deliberately fragment society into isolated groups. According to this idea, the overwhelming abundance of content isn't merely overwhelming, it's strategically divisive, creating artificial barriers between people based on their media preferences. The theory proposes that as individuals consume increasingly specialized content, they develop stronger tribal identities around their preferred media. These identities then become battlegrounds where fans of different franchises, platforms, or content creators view other groups with suspicion or hostility. What begins as simple entertainment preference gradually transforms into ideological separation. Proponents point to how media companies benefit from these divisions, as fragmented audiences are more likely to develop intense loyalty to specific brands or creators. This loyalty translates to reliable consumer behavior and predictable revenue streams. By encouraging viewers to define themselves by what they watch, read, or play, corporations essentially create pre-sorted market segments. The most concerning aspect of this theory involves media with extreme content or viewpoints. Because consuming such material requires crossing significant psychological thresholds, these audiences become even more isolated from mainstream society. The shared experience of consuming controversial content creates powerful in-group bonds while simultaneously widening the gap with outsiders. Some theorists extend this concept to political and news media, suggesting that the explosion of partisan news sources serves to sort the population into manageable factions that can be more easily manipulated. By encouraging people to build identities around media consumption rather than more substantial connections, power structures ensure that potential collective action remains fractured along artificial lines. Skeptics might find it ironic that discussions about media division theory often occur within the same digital spaces allegedly designed to separate us. Nothing brings people together quite like arguing about how we're being driven apart. Apocalypse virus theory suggests that powerful elites are deliberately promoting globalization to homogenize human immune systems worldwide. According to proponents, when diverse populations remain isolated, they develop unique immunities to different pathogens. By encouraging global travel, migration, and cultural mixing, elites are allegedly creating a situation where all humans share similar immune vulnerabilities. The theory claims this uniformity of immune response is being carefully monitored and mapped by shadowy organizations. Once this immunological homogenization reaches critical mass, these same elites supposedly plan to release an engineered super virus specifically designed to bypass our now standardized immune defenses. Had humanity maintained isolated population groups with diverse immune adaptations, at least some communities might have possessed natural resistance to elements of this bioweapon. Believers point to the rapid acceleration of global travel infrastructure, international business consolidation, and cultural exchange programs as evidence of this deliberate homogenization effort. They note how quickly disease can now spread globally compared to previous centuries, citing modern pandemics as test runs for monitoring immune response patterns. Some proponents even suggest certain vaccines actually serve to further standardize immune responses rather than strengthen them. The theory often appears alongside other depopulation conspiracies, with adherents claiming elite groups have underground bunkers, private islands, or secret treatments that would protect them during such a biological catastrophe. Ironically, the very isolation that conspiracy theorists sometimes seek might be exactly what preserves their unique immunological diversity. Fauna to Flora soul transference refers to the theoretical possibility of transferring animal souls into plant vessels, resulting in hybrid entities that retain characteristics of their original animal consciousness. Ancient Hindu and Buddhist texts allude to consciousness moving between different life forms during reincarnation cycles, which some conspiracy theorists cite as historical precedent for such transfers. The concept gained traction in 1970s fringe science communities after several botanists reported unusual plant reactions that mimicked animal defensive behaviors. These researchers claimed certain houseplants exhibited what appeared to be fear, aggression, or even affection in patterns consistent with domestic pets, rather than typical plant tropism. Some researchers point to carnivorous plants like the Venus flytrap and pitcher plant as potential evidence of previous soul transfers, suggesting their hunting mechanisms evolved from predatory animal instincts rather than purely environmental adaptation. These plants don't just capture prey passively, they actively sense, trap, and digest creatures in ways that seem eerily deliberate. Secret government experiments allegedly conducted during the Cold War attempted to transfer consciousness between species, with declassified documents showing unusual funding allocations to botanical-zoological hybrid research facilities. Whistleblowers claim successful transfers occurred between small mammals and fast-growing vine species, resulting in plants that would actively pursue small insects rather than waiting for them. The bioconsciousness transfer theory suggests that with proper quantum entanglement techniques, the essential consciousness patterns of a predatory animal could be mapped onto a plant's cellular structure, potentially creating flora with hunting instincts. Proponents point to mysterious hybrid plants discovered in remote locations that demonstrate inexplicable behaviors like coordinated movement or apparent pack hunting strategies. Several botanical gardens worldwide allegedly maintain restricted areas housing plant specimens that behave abnormally, including ones that reportedly respond to their names or react with apparent recognition to previous caretakers. Conspiracy theorists believe these specimens are successful fauna to flora transfers being studied in secret. Modern proponents suggest that certain aggressive invasive plant species might actually be the result of successful soul transfers, explaining their unusual ability to outcompete native species through what appears to be strategic rather than merely opportunistic growth patterns. Artificial causality stimulation refers to a complex conspiracy theory connecting population growth, resource harvesting, and metaphysical exploitation by elites. This theory suggests that powerful groups deliberately encourage human population expansion not for conventional reasons, but to stimulate Earth's production of spiritual or metaphysical resources that remain invisible to the average person. Proponents believe that just as living organisms can influence their environments to produce survival necessities, humanity's collective presence forces our planet to generate ethereal resources that exist beyond physical matter. The unprecedented population boom of recent centuries might actually be an orchestrated plan by those in power to maximize this metaphysical yield. According to adherents, elites harvest these spiritual essences while simultaneously cutting off access to those resources for the general population. This deprivation might explain why some people seem to lose their vitality or spiritual awareness despite material abundance. The theory incorporates NPC, non-player character concepts, suggesting that spiritually depleted humans become NPC-like, physically present but lacking true consciousness or agency. Alternatively, some versions propose that NPCs might be specially bred humans designed to function with minimal spiritual resources while still contributing to the upward causality that stimulates Earth's metaphysical production. This conspiracy meshes elements of traditional resource exploitation with metaphysical beliefs and simulation theory. It offers an explanation for why modern society often feels spiritually empty despite material progress. Our collective spiritual essence is being siphoned away by those who understand how to manipulate artificial causality. Some theorists point to ancient texts describing life force or spiritual energy as evidence that these metaphysical resources have always existed but have only recently been exploited at industrial scale. They suggest looking for signs of this harvesting in places where large populations gather, but spiritual fulfillment seems mysteriously absent. Cryptic Premonitions describes the purposeful ambiguity used by those who claim to see the future. Throughout history, prophets, seers, and clairvoyants have consistently delivered their predictions in riddles, metaphors, and vague statements rather than straightforward declarations. The theory suggests this deliberate cryptic communication serves a practical purpose. By revealing premonitions in ambiguous terms, the seer protects the integrity of the timeline. Clear warnings would trigger immediate reactions, creating butterfly effects that render the original vision obsolete or paradoxical. Ambiguity acts as a temporal safeguard. When prophecies remain cryptic, they can only be truly understood in retrospect or at the precise moment they become relevant. This preserves the causal chain while still allowing the information to be shared. Historical texts from Nostradamus to the Delphic Oracle showcase this pattern. Their prophecies avoided specific names, dates, or direct instructions, instead relying on symbolic language that could apply to multiple scenarios. This isn't necessarily evidence of fraudulent predictions, but might be an intentional mechanism to prevent timeline contamination. Modern parapsychology researchers have noted that even in laboratory studies of precognition, subjects often struggle to articulate their impressions clearly. Their descriptions frequently contain symbolic or metaphorical elements rather than literal details about future events. The theory connects to quantum physics concepts about observation affecting outcomes. Just as measuring a quantum particle changes its behavior, clearly communicating a premonition might alter the probability field of future events. Some proponents argue that genuine psychics instinctively understand this temporal dilemma. Their subconscious minds encode premonitions in symbolic language as a natural defense mechanism against paradoxes. This could explain why even self-proclaimed psychics with proven track records rarely provide unambiguous predictions about significant events. Perhaps the universe has built-in safeguards against certain forms of temporal knowledge transfer. Like trying to grab smoke with your hands, the clearer you attempt to make a premonition, the more it slips away from accuracy. Extraterrestrial evolution centers on the idea that human evolution might be artificially guided by outside forces rather than occurring naturally over extensive time periods. Throughout history, the inability to directly observe evolutionary changes has been attributed to the immense timescales involved, but this theory suggests something more deliberate is at work. According to proponents, advanced beings, possibly extraterrestrials or survivors from previous human civilizations, have been actively manipulating our genetic development through targeted interventions. These manipulations might include introducing specific diseases to eliminate certain populations or contaminating environments with chemicals that cause genetic mutations, ultimately steering human development in predetermined directions. The theory points to unexplained evolutionary leaps in human history, particularly the rapid development of the human brain compared to other species. Some adherents believe these accelerated changes couldn't possibly have occurred through random mutation and natural selection alone, suggesting external influence as the only plausible explanation. Interestingly, some versions of this theory propose that human evolution has recently stalled because our technological advancement has reached a point where we might detect such manipulations. Our sophisticated environmental monitoring, medical diagnostics, and genetic sequencing capabilities may have forced these evolutionary architects to cease their interventions. This cessation could explain why modern humans show few signs of ongoing evolution despite changing environmental pressures. The concerning implication is that without this external guidance, humanity might be biologically stagnating, potentially leading to our extinction if we cannot adapt to future challenges naturally. Some researchers point to ancient texts describing gods who modified early humans as potential evidence, while others cite unexplained genetic anomalies or the missing link in human evolution. Of course, mainstream science attributes these gaps to incomplete fossil records rather than alien meddling. Perhaps the most ironic twist in this theory, our scientific progress may have inadvertently ended the very process that made such progress possible in the first place. Internet old magic refers to the mystical presence some believe lingered in the early internet's architecture, a result of occult practices conducted by elites who had privileged access to the technology long before the general public. According to this theory, these powerful groups weren't just sending emails and creating spreadsheets, they were establishing digital temples and conducting elaborate techno-rituals in the virtual realm. The peculiar atmosphere of certain early websites, their inexplicable draw, their ability to induce trances, their synchronistic connection to real-world events, is attributed to residual spiritual energy from these occult workings. Believers point to websites that seem to know things they shouldn't, or platforms where users experience collective visions or shared dreams after visiting specific pages. Some proponents claim that certain early chat rooms and bulletin boards were designed using sacred geometry principles, with their interfaces incorporating subtle sigils and symbols visible only to the initiated. These digital sigils supposedly activated when viewed through specialized equipment or during specific astronomical alignments. Adherents note that the decline of this internet magic coincides with the web's commercialization and mainstreaming. What was once a realm of mystery became dominated by algorithms and advertising, effectively neutralizing the mystical energies. Some theorists believe this dilution was merely the natural result of increased usage, while others insist it was a deliberate cleansing operation to prevent ordinary people from accessing these digital powers. The theory connects to various documented phenomena like the web crawler effect, where early search engines occasionally returned results containing information not yet published anywhere online. Similarly, the lost hour incidents, where users on certain forums would experience missing time while browsing, are cited as evidence of these metaphysical properties. Digital archaeologists searching for traces of this old magic reportedly discovered strange code fragments in abandoned websites, sequences that serve no programming purpose but correspond to ancient magical formulas. When compiled and executed, these code fragments allegedly cause unusual hardware behavior, like monitors displaying colors outside their normal spectrum. Some tech industry veterans admit in private that early internet pioneers did incorporate esoteric principles into their work, though whether this was serious occult practice or merely playful experimentation remains disputed. Either way, believers maintain that the original internet was less a network of computers and more a technological implementation of what alchemists called the subtle body, a vehicle for consciousness beyond physical limitations. Perhaps the clean, sanitized internet we use today is merely what remains after a thorough spiritual cleansing, a ghost of something that once bridged worlds. Dyson sphere already constructed refers to the theory that an enormous megastructure has been built around our sun, harvesting its energy while remaining hidden from public knowledge. First proposed by physicist Freeman Dyson as a theoretical method for advanced civilizations to capture stellar energy, some conspiracy theorists believe such a structure already exists around our own star. Solar anomalies like the coronal heating problem, where the sun's atmosphere is hundreds of times hotter than its surface, are cited as evidence of this hidden megastructure. Mainstream science struggles to fully explain this phenomenon, leading some to suggest that the excess heat comes from the Dyson sphere's energy collection and transmission systems. According to the theory, this vast cosmic infrastructure wasn't built by public space agencies, but by hidden super societies with technology centuries beyond our own. These groups might include inner Earth civilizations or secret breakaway human factions who require enormous energy to power their advanced technologies and hidden realms. Some versions of this theory merge with spiritual beliefs, suggesting that what's being harvested isn't merely physical energy, but literal divine power, the angelic sun theory. Elites supposedly use this harvested divine energy for occult rituals that grant extraordinary abilities, including a form of technological immortality that mimics divine beings. Perhaps most disturbing is the extinction failsafe aspect of the theory. Believers claim that those controlling the Dyson sphere could potentially block sunlight from reaching Earth entirely, causing rapid global freezing and extinction, the ultimate doomsday device held over humanity. Solar shields would theoretically allow selective targeting, giving controllers the ability to plunge specific regions into darkness while leaving others untouched. The complete absence of observable evidence for such a massive structure is explained away as proof of the controller's technological superiority. After all, any civilization capable of building a Dyson sphere would presumably have the technology to make it undetectable to conventional astronomy. And really, who's going to look directly at the sun to check? Time travel shrinkage describes how future civilizations that develop timeline manipulation technologies might inadvertently cross between parallel realities when attempting to visit their own past. This phenomenon could explain anomalous archaeological discoveries that appear technologically impossible for their time period. They're actually artifacts from alternate timelines whose time travelers got cosmically sidetracked. The theory builds upon the Oz factor concept from UFO encounters, where witnesses report a sensation of shifting into a different reality. Applied to time travel, this suggests that moving through temporal dimensions weakens the barriers between parallel universes, causing travelers to shrink or slip into neighboring timelines rather than their original timelines past. Several unexplained archaeological finds serve as potential evidence. The Baghdad Battery, ancient Egyptian aircraft models, the Antikythera mechanism, and various out-of-place artifacts that display knowledge or manufacturing techniques that shouldn't have existed when they were created. Rather than being evidence of ancient aliens, these might be the lost remnants of interdimensional time travel mishaps. The hypothesis offers an intriguing alternative to the classic grandfather paradox. Instead of changing your own timeline by killing your grandfather, you'd simply shift into a parallel universe where your actions create a new branch of reality, neatly solving the causality problem while explaining why we haven't encountered tourists from our own future. Some proponents suggest that certain historical texts describing visitors from the heavens might actually be documenting these timeline-crossed travelers, whose appearance, language, and technology would have seemed divine or magical to ancient peoples. The visitors themselves, likely confused about being in the wrong version of history, might have unintentionally spawned various religious and mythological traditions. Apparently, the future has a terrible sense of direction. They keep trying to visit their own past but end up as our ancient aliens instead. Modular Prophecies refers to the spiritual concept that divine truth has been purposefully fragmented and distributed among different human civilizations throughout history. This theory suggests that a higher power or cosmic intelligence deliberately gave distinct pieces of spiritual wisdom to various religious and cultural traditions, with none possessing the complete picture alone. Scripture across diverse traditions contains puzzling gaps or seemingly incomplete theological frameworks that fit together with other faiths like pieces of a cosmic jigsaw puzzle. When these theological fragments are aligned properly, they reveal previously undetectable patterns that scholars claim cannot be mere coincidence. Historical evidence shows mysterious similarities between geographically isolated religious traditions, with complementary doctrines appearing in cultures that had no known contact. Ancient texts from Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and pre-Columbian America contain mathematical formulations and cosmological constants that, when combined, produce startlingly precise astronomical calculations impossible for any single civilization to derive alone. Secret societies throughout history appear to have understood this principle, with Rosicrucians, certain Masonic orders, and mystery schools collecting religious texts from diverse traditions. Their hidden archives reportedly contain attempts to synthesize these teachings into unified spiritual frameworks, though they kept these syntheses hidden, believing humanity wasn't ready for complete revelation. Modern theological scholars have identified mathematical patterns in sacred texts that manifest only when passages from different traditions are combined in specific sequences. These theological algorithms seem designed to activate only when diverse spiritual perspectives are harmonized, suggesting an intentional divine encryption method. The Modular Prophecies theory positions humanity's fragmentation and tribalism as a deliberate cosmic test. Only when we overcome cultural and religious divisions can we assemble the complete spiritual blueprint necessary for our collective evolution or ascension. This cosmic puzzle serves as both test and reward, proof that humanity has achieved the unity necessary for the next phase of consciousness. Interestingly, quantum physicists researching consciousness have recently noted that certain mathematical models of universal awareness closely resemble these ancient fragmented religious formulations when properly combined. Some theorists suggest this might not be metaphorical but literal, that consciousness itself might operate on principles of fragmentation and reunification. The ultimate implication is unsettling yet hopeful. Perhaps divinity itself is incomplete without humanity's participation in assembling these fragments. The cosmos might be waiting for us to solve this spiritual Rubik's Cube before revealing what comes next, making us not just passive recipients of divine wisdom, but active co-creators in the universe's unfolding purpose. Cosmic graduation requirements are apparently quite the group project. The Cavern Guardian proposes that the Garden of Eden remains hidden within Earth's unmapped cave systems, still protected by the biblical angel with a flaming sword. According to Genesis, after Adam and Eve's expulsion, God placed a cherubim with a fiery blade to guard the garden's entrance and prevent human re-entry. This theory suggests this divine sentinel continues its eternal watch deep within the Earth's underground network. Unexplained disappearances of explorers and spelunkers in remote cave systems worldwide might actually be encounters with this celestial guardian. Reports dating back centuries describe mysterious lights, unexplainable heat sources, and whispering voices in caves that seem to vanish when approached, potentially manifestations of the angel's presence or its flaming sword. The theory connects with historical obsessions various religious orders and secret societies have had with cave exploration. The Knights Templar, certain Masonic lodges, and even Nazi expeditions showed unusual interest in specific cave systems, possibly searching not for treasure but for tangible proof of biblical narratives and direct access to divine power. Their meticulous mapping efforts conspicuously avoid certain regions, perhaps out of fear or respect for what guards these areas. Local folklore across different cultures contains remarkably similar stories of caves where heaven touches earth and warnings about fiery guardians who prevent passage beyond certain points. Some indigenous cave paintings depict winged figures with flame-like appendages guarding entrances to deeper passages. The theory also explains why modern mapping technology struggles in certain underground regions. Equipment malfunctions, electromagnetic anomalies, and inexplicable gaps in sonar and radar readings might be caused by supernatural interference rather than technical limitations. Some versions suggest the Guardian doesn't immediately destroy trespassers, but instead redirects them through dimensional passages to other realms, explaining why bodies are never recovered despite extensive search efforts. This would mean the missing aren't dead, but rather eternally lost in divine exile, much like humanity's original expulsion from paradise. Those supporting this theory point to the peculiar fact that certain deep cave systems remain unexplored despite modern technology, as if something beyond human understanding prevents their complete documentation. As one caver cryptically noted in his final journal entry before disappearing, "The deeper we go, the more it feels like trespassing." Ancient bioengineering describes a theory that historical geniuses and influential leaders were not random evolutionary occurrences, but deliberately engineered biological specimens. According to this concept, these exceptional individuals were created by advanced civilizations from previous cycles of human development and kept in stasis until needed to guide humanity in specific directions. Proponents connect this idea to the Panergic Protocols theory, suggesting that governments throughout history haven't merely identified and utilized naturally occurring talent, but instead activated pre-engineered individuals at strategic moments. These biological constructs, appearing as normal humans, possessed intellectual capacities, charisma, and leadership qualities far beyond typical human potential. The theory suggests that certain secret societies are actually comprised of reset survivors, highly advanced beings who survived previous civilization collapses. These survivors supposedly maintained knowledge of genetic engineering techniques lost to mainstream society and used this knowledge to create specialized humans programmed to introduce specific innovations or ideologies. Ancient texts referencing divine birth or gods walking among men are interpreted by believers as descriptions of these engineered beings. They point to individuals like Leonardo da Vinci, Isaac Newton, and other polymaths whose abilities seem to dramatically exceed their contemporaries as potential examples of ancient bioengineering. Some versions of the theory propose that these engineered individuals were kept in suspended animation or stasis chambers hidden in underground facilities until historical conditions were optimal for their deployment. This would explain sudden appearances of revolutionary thinkers during critical historical junctures. Theorists point to unexplained archaeological anomalies, such as ancient Egyptian medical texts describing surprisingly advanced surgical procedures, as evidence that previous civilizations possessed sophisticated biological knowledge. They suggest these texts are fragments of the Reset Survivors' bioengineering manuals. Believers claim that DNA analysis of historical figures' remains would reveal artificial genetic markers, though conveniently, most famous historical figures' genetic material is either inaccessible or too degraded for comprehensive analysis.